In my last YouTube video, I talked about how an idea of moving to Rhode Island from California became a reality in less than 5 months' time. I convinced a landlord to rent us an apartment without having jobs in Rhode Island. I flew back to California and I had less than a month to prepare everything for the move. We did not own our house in California, so we only had to focus on the things that we were going to keep. In our 20s, we had the mindset of more. So of course, we had quite a few things to get rid of, which included a 1989 Class C motorhome, a 1970s jet boat, both of which we hadn't used in years, a long bed pickup truck, a dirt bike, and a trailer for our dirt bikes. We also had 3 cars. So 2 of the 3 cars we knew we were going to bring to Rhode Island. The 3rd car we were going to leave in California. So my husband actually had a job in California. So he bought a one-way ticket back to California and gave himself about 2 weeks to get us settled in Rhode Island before he would go back to California, keep working his job there until he found a job in Rhode Island, or until the summer break, at which time he would have flown back to Rhode Island and hopefully find a job. So that car we were going to leave in California so he could use it. So we looked into a few options to get our stuff from California to Rhode Island, but the best option was going to be the best option. I don't know about the best option, but the cheapest option was going to be to rent a moving truck and move ourselves across country. We also had to rent a car trailer so that we could tow the 4Runner behind the moving truck, and then I, of course, was going to drive my car. Up until this point in our marriage, we always lived in 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom houses with garages. So now we were moving to an apartment that was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, no garage. There was some storage in the basement, but we had to consider that when moving across the country. I feel like this whole time period was a whirlwind. Not only did we have to get rid of stuff that we had accumulated over 10 years' time, we were leaving family and friends, and I lived my entire life in the West, and most of it was in California. So this was going to be a huge change. We planned on driving across country in 3 days. So let's break this down. It takes 1 day and 18 hours to get from where we lived in California to Providence, Rhode Island. So that's over 40 hours. So if we wanted to do it in 3 days, that meant that we had to drive 14 hours a day straight. We had a moving truck towing a car trailer that had a 4Runner on it, and I was driving my car, which had my son, an African gray Parrot, and our little dachshund mix in it. So I'm not too sure why we thought we'd be able to get across country in 3 days' time. Okay, this was the plan. We were gonna be taking the 40 all the way across until Tennessee. Then somewhere in Tennessee, about Knoxville, we got on a different interstate, and then a different interstate until we made it to Rhode Island. Oh, you can barely see it, it's so small. Day 1. The night before we were going to leave, we planned on having everything ready so that we can leave first thing in the morning. Well, that didn't happen. We were still getting things together, tying up loose ends. My husband decided to leave first. He figured since he's driving the moving truck, he'll be a little bit slower and I can finish getting things done, and then I'd leave and catch up with him. 1 hour into him driving, I was still working on getting things done at the house. He gives me a call to let me know that something is wrong with the moving truck. It wouldn't go over 35, 40 miles per hour. So he was crawling down the freeway. I'm not too sure on how everything transpired. This was 9 years ago, so my memory's a little bit fuzzy. But day one, we ended up making it to Kingman, Arizona. Now, if you're familiar with this area, Southern California, Arizona area, you know we did not make it that far. It's less than a 6-hour drive. But because the moving truck was going so slow, that's where we made it. And on top of that, I believe the moving truck company was going to have somebody come out to look at the truck in Kingman. So somebody did come to our hotel we were staying at in Kingman. They looked at the truck. They did find something wrong with it, but nothing catastrophic. And the part to fix it was going to be 2 days out. So he said, we can keep going, and by the time the part is available, we'll be somewhere else where we can get that part. Day two. So day two, we kind of did the same thing. Because the truck was running so slow, my husband said, I'm gonna leave first, then you can take your time checking out of the hotel, because there was no hurry, because the truck was barely going. He calls me after he had been on the road for quite some time and lets me know that the truck is running very bad. At that point, he was somewhere near Flagstaff, Arizona. And if you're familiar with that area, it has a pretty steep grade. But because the truck wasn't running correctly, it was going very slow. He said it was barely moving, basically. So I got on the phone with the moving truck company, and I was sitting in my car because I already had checked out of the hotel and we were in the parking lot of the grocery store. And for some reason, I had my car in the on position. Not all the way on, but just on. Well, in this time, my battery died. So I didn't want to call my husband because he was already fuming over the issue with the moving truck. So I put my big girl panties on and I called AAA so that they could come out and recharge my battery. That was another wait. I think we waited about 1 to 2 hours. There was a Taco Bell in the parking lot, so we went over there and got something to eat. AAA came and they recharged my battery, and I was on my way. So even though now there's been like 2 or 3 hours that have passed since my husband left and the truck was moving very slow, I still hadn't caught up with him. And one thing that we did take into account is while I was in Rhode Island looking at rental houses, I didn't have very good cell phone coverage because our carrier at the time had coverage in the west and the southwest. So I changed cell phone carriers in Rhode Island and my coverage was more in the northeast. Luckily, either the night before or the morning of, we did have a plan to stop at a hotel in Tucumcari, New Mexico. So I know where I needed to go, but the problem was I lost cell phone coverage. So my husband got to the hotel before me. He figured that I would have been there first, or we would have been arriving together because his truck was going so slow. Well, I wasn't there. And after a while, he started to get really concerned. He asked at the front desk whether or not they had seen me. More time went by, and he was this close to calling hospitals to find out if there was an accident in the area and if I had been brought in. Because every time he tried to call my cell phone, it went straight to voicemail. While I'm driving up the road, he's walking up the road. He was gonna go to the interstate to try to see if he could find anything. I'm not too sure what he was gonna try to find, but at any rate, I showed up. And from that point on, we decided that we would never split up that way. And no matter how slow I had to go, I was going to stay behind him so that this wouldn't happen again. Now it is day 3. and we are just in New Mexico. So by now we know for sure there's no way we're going to make it to Rhode Island in one more day. So from New Mexico, we planned on making it to Russellville, Arkansas. The drive was fine, other than going extremely slow. I think there were quite a few times that I put on my hazards because I didn't want anybody to crash into me because I was having to drive so slow. The truck really was going maybe 35 miles per hour. So I was even going less than that. It was a long drive, but somewhere outside of Russellville, Arkansas, it was pitch black, pouring rain. My husband calls me and asks me to see if anything is wrong with the trailer. He says, "Lisa, can you tell, is there anything wrong? I heard this loud sound. Are the tires okay on the trailer? Is everything fine?" And from what I could see, everything was fine. The tires were on the trailer, there wasn't a flat tire, and everything was fine. So when we're pulling into the hotel in Russellville, my husband's making the turn, and that's when I saw it. The wheel was completely gone. So the tire, rim, and everything. The trailer was missing a wheel. And I don't even know how we got so lucky that nothing happened to the trailer. So once again, I was on the phone with the moving truck company, and this time I was able to tell them a wheel came off. So now we have a trailer that is not drivable, even though somehow we drove it to the hotel. So they told us that what would happen is the trailer would need to be replaced. The new trailer would be coming from Little Rock, Arkansas, and that was about an hour away from where we were. So we were thinking, oh great, now we got to take the 4Runner off the trailer and tow the trailer with either the 4Runner or the moving truck. And I think what we decided is that it would be best if we towed the trailer with the moving truck, just because we didn't want to have any liability issues with towing it with our 4Runner. So that night we just kind of chilled out at the hotel. I remember I went and got food from Wendy's, and we just ate in the hotel room. So early in the morning we receive a phone call. I think we were still sleeping at the time, and it was a man that said, "Hey, I have your trailer down here." So thank goodness we didn't even have to drive to Little Rock and get it. So this was another funny story. The guy that came to drop off the trailer, first off, he said we were very lucky because he's seen it before where for some reason the wheel comes off the tire, the ball, something, the nut, I don't know, something sheared off. I'll insert some pictures. And the wheel came off. But usually what happens is the trailer will flip and whatever car is being towed is destroyed. I think we looked up on the news to make sure nothing happened on the interstate somewhere by there, like a accident, because the wheel literally would have been rolling down the interstate. So he helps my husband with getting the new trailer connected to the truck and the 4Runner loaded up on the trailer. And this is where, once again, we realize this whole Kevin Bacon thing, separated by 7 degrees, whatever it is. He has a sister that lives near where we lived in California, but he started describing this dive bar that they usually go to when he visits his sister. And we knew exactly what he was talking about. It's a really fun place. He loves it too. And so it was just funny that we ran into the second person that was sent out to help with the moving truck had ties to where we just came from. So once we got the trailer connected, he went on his way, we packed up, and we got driving again. We make a plan to stop in Lebanon, Tennessee, because basically from this point on, we realized we didn't make it to Rhode Island in 3 days. And we were so lucky that nothing horrible happened when the tire came off the trailer, that we would just take our time for the rest of the drive. The truck was moving just fine and we're going down the road just fine, but still we were following each other just because of what happened in the last 2 days. But somewhere in eastern Arkansas, I start noticing, why are there cars on the side of the road? Like, what's going on? And at that point, my husband called me to tell me, hey, Lisa, the road is like gone. There's so many potholes. And bam, I hit the potholes. I don't know, it sounded like the car was gonna fall apart. I pulled over to make sure that the car was fine, and it was, and we were on our way to Lebanon, Tennessee. Now, the funny thing about Lebanon, Tennessee is my husband, when he was younger, he used to drive from the east back to Northern California often. And one time when he was driving to the east from Northern California, his clutch went out in his car. Now, this is sometime in the mid-90s, so there's no cell phone service or anything. He calls his dad, and his dad says, well, what am I gonna do? But luckily, his brother lived in Tennessee at the time, and somehow they met up in Lebanon, Tennessee. His brother helped him fix his car, and he was on his way to where he needed to go. But I just kind of love that story about Lebanon, Tennessee, and that is why we decided to stop there for our, what would that have been? 1 night Kingman, 2 night Tucumcari, 3 night Russellville, 4th night on the road. Now we are on day 5 of the move across the country. So from Lebanon, Tennessee, we planned on going to Staunton, Virginia. And this part of the drive, there was no issues. We stayed together and we made it to the hotel. And this was the first night that we could really breathe a sigh of relief. We made it this far. We were almost to Rhode Island. So that night, in the hotel parking lot, there was a Chili's, and my husband and I had dinner at the bar. Don't worry, my son was old enough. He stayed back at the hotel room with the dog and the bird. But we enjoyed a margarita and just talked about what had happened so far up until this point and how relieved we were that we made it safely as far as we did. And it could have been so much worse. So from Staunton, Virginia, we drove the rest of the way to Rhode Island. And that was no problem either. The only thing was I was so anxious about driving into New York City. Now I know I came from the LA area, but for the most part where we lived, you didn't have crazy traffic like I was thinking in my head, New York City. Like I'm coming into New York City and have to go through New York City. But it wasn't bad at all because we were on the interstate. So we make it, and right at the border of Rhode Island and Connecticut, I got gas for the last time. That gas station is still there, and every time I drive by that gas station, I think about the day we made it and moved to Rhode Island. I mentioned in the beginning that my husband was planning on flying back and to continue working in California. But right before we were leaving, we found out that he got a job in Rhode Island. So he ended up canceling that one-way ticket and we were officially moved to Rhode Island. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make some videos about how we landed, where we landed, some of the differences between Rhode Island and California. And then also I plan on doing videos about the different areas and neighborhoods in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. So in the meantime, if you have any questions and you happen to be moving to Rhode Island or Massachusetts, or maybe you're even considering on moving to Southern California, leave your questions in the comments and I'll get back to you. If you made it to the end, thank you for watching.